Back in April, I released a video about the history of Darker Than Black, and in it I briefly touched on the English release, but I wanted to learn a little bit more about what happened in the creation of the English dub. So I reached out to John Swasey, who plays Huang in the first season of Darker Than Black. He was gracious enough to agree to an interview, and that's what I'm here to share with you guys today. In it, we talk about how he got the role, what his mindset is, and a bunch of other things relating to not just Darker Than Black, but voice acting in general. So I hope you all enjoy it. And my first question is, recently I did a feature on the creation of Darker Than Black, and I mainly went over it from the production side of things. And now I'm trying to get more information about exactly what happened when Funimation licensed it and the English dub was released. So my first question is, when did you hear about Funimation's plans to dub the series, or when they obtained the license? Because I believe they first got the license in June of 2007. So I'm wondering when you started talks with them about that, or when you heard about that.
So really with regards to that kind of stuff, actors are not really involved in the licensing and the negotiations and things like that. Now, what we do know is, we can read online, social media, trades, whatever, that, so-and-so has acquired the dubbing license or the whatever for a show. And if there's a show that you're interested in and you find out about it, people will generally contact you and go, or you can contact the directors and say, hey, I understand y'all are dubbing this. Is there a chance I could get an audition? I love that show, blah, blah, blah. And that certainly happened to me as a director with Sentai Filmworks, where people contact me when they find out we're dubbing a particular show and they want to get in on it because they love that show. With Darker Than Black, the director, the ADR director, was a guy by the name of Zach Bolton. And Zach and I have been working on a number of things together, and just had a really good actor-director working relationship. And to be honest with you, I don't remember even auditioning for that. I think Zach just said, you know what, Huang needs to be John Swasey because he'd be perfect for that. And so I didn't really know a whole lot about the show itself. But when I went in to start working on it, I was blown away. I mean, I love working on all shows, but I particularly love doing stuff that's has a more realistic bend to it. You know what I mean? Like Darker Than Black, where it's not your typical anime where there's, goofy eyes and, silliness. There is more realism to it. And so when I started working on that, was immediately drawn to it and really fell in love with it. I mean, just because I love the stylization of it. But as far as like the proceedings of, when did I get involved? I got involved when they said, John, we want you for this role.
So that's really interesting. So my next question would be, since you didn't really, this wasn't a character that you'd looked into or that you'd read anything for, you would just kind of pick for the role. So when did you first learn about Huang and who he was as a character, and how did you connect with him?
Well, I learned about him when I got to the studio. For a lot of different reasons, there's not a whole lot of, hey, I'm going to have you play this character in a couple of weeks. So I need you to read up on him, read all about him, learn about him, all that kind of stuff. In this industry, the anime dubbing industry, we just don't have the luxury of that happening, because usually there's no time. So sometimes there might be, but for the most part, we usually get something, we just get it kind of handed to us. And, the first thing that I would do or I did, was listen to what the actor was doing, the Japanese actor, and try to capture his essence on how his performance was being handled. And I didn't want to mimic his performance, but I certainly, I was not going to go in. I don't go in there, but I didn't then, and I don't now. You don't go in there with this, well, I'm going to make this my own, and I'm going to do the, you have to stay pretty true to what the original actor did. So when I did it, I listened to the actor, and I and I watched it, and I just remember the nuances that this actor did, and kind of his, his sort of gruff attitude, and his voice was sort of like this. And I really love that. First of all, that's something that's right in my wheelhouse. I love that kind of character. But I just kind of approached it from looking at what that, or listening and looking at what the original actor did, and trying to capture that essence. And so I could present a reasonable, hopefully acceptable English adaptation of it. And I did a little bit of reading about the show, and stuff like that. But again, when we get in there, we might do a couple hours worth of stuff, and we might not touch it again for a month, or, a couple of weeks, depending on what it is. Now, Funimation in particular does dubcasts where all of their shows are being released weekly. So if you're in a show, you're doing one episode at a time, maybe two if you're at the tail end of one recording cycle and at the beginning of a new recording cycle. But for that show, we were doing, 4 or 5 episodes at a time to get the season done. And so we would record stuff and then, come back a few days later or a week later, whatever. But there generally just isn't a whole lot of time. And also, to be perfectly honest, when in those days especially, the actors that were seasoned, and I don't mean this with any disrespect to new actors, but I've been doing this since 1997, and the actors that were seasoned were doing a lot of shows, so there just wasn't time to, I'm going to take the day and just study all about Huang and learn everything I can about him, because I'm busy working on other shows and I have to jump from one show to another show, and a lot of actors had to do that. And so really we find our niche or our groove once we're there. And Zach Bolton, the director, is very, very good about guiding you into that groove and then keeping you in that groove. He did it with Huang, he did it with Soul Eater, with Lord Death, with me. And he's really just tops on that. And but once you get in there, then you're kind of in I don't want to say a coasting pattern, but or autopilot. It's nothing like that, but you kind of know where you are. So as long as you stay in there, you're good to go.
It looks like you also played a supporting role for Naoyasu Kirihara. I'm just wondering exactly how that went, how much of a shift that was, and how long that may have taken to record, as opposed to
to me, I'm gonna be brutally honest. I don't remember that character.
Yeah.
I again, we back in those days, there just weren't as many actors, so it'd be like, it could have been something like, oh, I finished early. Like, let's say they booked me for 15 hours to do Huang, and I finished in 10. Oh, well, we still got 5 hours. You know what? Let's do this character over here. He's not in any scenes with Huang. He's different. And, I've been very blessed to have sort of a chameleon type voice where I can do a lot of different characters. So that was one that was probably that case, but I really don't. Huang is the one that I remember from that show the most. And that's the one that, when you say Darker Than Black, I identify with Huang. He's in fact, if you go to my website and look at my demo, he's the first character on my demo. It's one of my favorite voices I've ever done.
Interesting. You said that they would they will reserve your time basically for different blocks. So did you record? You said I think you said earlier that you recorded things like what 5-hour sessions or so or something, right? Or something like that.
No, it wouldn't be 5-hour sessions. If usually an actor doesn't do more than it depends, but generally you do about a 2 to 3 hour session, and then you're done for the day. Really, anything more than that could really hurt your vocal cords, or you may start to lose your voice. And it depends on the character. I mean, something like Huang, I could do all day long. But if I'm doing Salvador from Borderlands 2, where everything is like this, I can't sustain that for more than an hour, or maybe 2. But they would, we have it's just a formula. If you have X amount of cues, that means you got to be booked for Y amount of hours. So you're just, you're booked for those times. But sometimes it's in one day. Sometimes they'll spread it out over a couple of days. It just depends.
So based on the way that you've described how the process works, it doesn't seem like there's very much, if any, interaction with other voice actors. Is that the case?
Oh, there's this much. There's zero. When you're in the studio, you go in, and this is even pre-COVID. You would go in the studio and you're in the booth, and the director's and the engineer out in the studio portion in the control room, and you're doing your stuff. And actors, we all work one at a time because we're laying in the dialogue. We're ADRing. So there's no way we could have multiple actors in there at the same time recording a bunch of lines, even on different microphones, even if they're in different booths, because the engineer still has to lay it all in, and it would take forever for them to have to lay in 3 different or 4 different, voice actors after recording something. So what we do is we go in, and in a script, let's say I have 50 cues, I'll do, it just depends on who the director is and what studio you're working for. They all have kind of slightly different methods and idiosyncrasies and methodologies and such. But you go in and basically you record one line at a time. They lay it in there to make sure it fits and it sounds right. It fits right. Not only within the mouth flap context, but also within the context. It has to fit within what's going on. Was the line delivered correctly to make sense in that scene? So, but yeah, you never run into the voice actors. And of course, now with the pandemic, we've gotten into such a remote situation where everyone's recording remotely. It's very rare you run into other actors. Every now and then you might see somebody in a studio, but again, with the pandemic, we try to avoid that by keeping people scheduled differently, as opposed to, the old days where, people come in, they're like, "Oh, hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you forever," hugs and kisses and all around, and, that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's definitely changed, but we never work with another actor. Unless, let me tell you, at least in the old days, they don't really do this anymore, unless you're doing Walla. And Walla is like group noises, a crowd scene. And they would do things at Funimation and Sentai where they'd bring in numerous actors all at once and put them in a booth and just be in a crowd. And it just sounds like a bunch of noise. It's unintelligible vocal fodder.
A couple times you mentioned cues. Could you explain exactly what you mean?
Sure. So the lines are delivered, there's a script. Okay. And every script, there's an actor or multiple actors. So the lines are divvied up into what we call cues. So for instance, if my scene was, now listen to me, I mean what I say, and I say what I mean. So get your butt down there and get the job done. Okay. Theoretically, that's one line. But it could be broken up into multiple cues. It could be one cue with pauses in it, or which we use with showing an ellipses that demonstrates a pause. Or it could be broken up into cues. And then the reason they do it into cues, which is line by line by line, is that the whole thing is a time code. There's time code. And so it helps the engineer go, I need to go to time code 01, 05, 25. And you plug in your computer where that is, and the computer goes there, and then you hit record, and that's where your line is. So, but a cue, and again, it's different studios do it different ways. Funimation, and by the way, no one way is better than the other. They're just different. But Funimation does it by cues, but then they also have it by lines. And I think it's like every 5 words equals 1 line. So they may say, hey, you have 150 lines, but it may only be 50 cues. Whereas at Sentai, we just call every time there's a line in the script, that's a cue. So you might have a line that's like what I just did, and then you might have an effort where it's like a or you know, in anime, every time you turn your head, the character makes a noise. You know, you're sitting there looking this way, and somebody goes, "Hey, John," you're like, you know, there's always some noise being made. So we call those cues, and it just gives us a more scientific and calculated way to be able to place the lines accurately in the script or in the video.
How much of that is because trying to match what the voice actor says to the lip movements, or is that just standard industry practice for voice acting in general using time codes?
That's industry standards. I mean, time code is stuff they use in film. Every script has time code, because when they're editing, it's all for the editing. When they're editing, they need the time code to know where stuff goes. So that's an industry standard issue.
When it comes to the script itself, is it just you see exactly what the words are and you read those, or is there any room for interpretation or ad-libbing or anything like that?
When you read a script, you read what's there. Sometimes what's written is not enough words. Sometimes it's too many words. Sometimes the break isn't exactly in the right place. Sometimes the words aren't written as well as the director would prefer. So it's not so much ad lib, but there is a lot of it's a organic process. It's not a read those words, those are the words. It's not that at all. It's a very organic process. I was working on a show today, directing with a dear friend of mine, David Wald, who's a very talented actor. And but he also has directed, he's written, you know. And again, we've been doing this so long that a lot of this is just like second nature. But a line didn't fit. And he goes, you know what, hang on, I can make that fit. And he went in, and when he did the line, he actually changed some of the words. Not to change the meaning. That's very, very important. You can't change the meaning. But if it's like, he went that way. He went that way. There's 4 syllables. Every syllable represents a lip flap, essentially. But let's say it's short. So it's like, he went that way. There's two more lip flaps or something. So you might say something like, he took off and went that way. So, I mean, it means the exact same thing, but we just added a few words. A friend of mine has a phrase for that called flap spackle. You're basically just plugging holes of flaps, but you cannot change the meaning. You couldn't say he went that way and that doesn't fit. So you go, well, I don't know where he is. Well, that might fit, but that doesn't mean the same thing. So, you can't do anything like that. But, when you record like this, you've got the engineer, the actor, and the director, the ADR director. And it really is a team effort to get it done. You're the three guys or girls in the booth working together, and it really is a team effort to get the finished product done before it goes off to mix and to QC and printing and all that kind of stuff. So we tend to let each other have some leniency and some leeway. At the end of the day, it's the director is sort of the captain of the ship, though. So the director gets to make the final call. But a lot of us have been working in this industry for a long time, and we're all friends. We all know each other, and I think one thing that's very important to remember is that, this is, if I'm directing a show, this is not my creation. I did not create this. I am simply dubbing it into another language. And I want to make it sound as close to the original as possible, and to keep and maintain the integrity of the original. Now, if I have to change a couple of things to make words fit, that's fine. But I'm not going to change things like meaning, intention. An example of that would be, if something's whispered, I'm not going to go, well, I want you to yell it. That doesn't make sense. Or vice versa. If it's whispered, you have to whisper it. That's why it's really important to listen to what the Japanese actor is doing and watch what's going on.
When everything was done and finished and everything, do you, well, specifically with Darker Than Black, but also in general, like, did you go back and did you watch it? And if you did, what did you think of it? Well, I know you said you liked the show, but maybe your performance in general.
So usually when you watch something, or when you perform something, the actor doesn't really get a chance to go back and look at it and say, like, man, I'd really like to change that. Or, you really have to kind of leave that in the director's hands, because you're hoping that the director is making the right choice. And 99.999% of the time they do. But actors can be also very fickle and very self-deprecating and self-criticizing and things like that. And it's, very common for an actor to go, oh man, I really sucked in that. And the fact is, no, you didn't. Or no, I didn't. It's just, I'm being too hard on myself. So we don't really get a chance to look at it again. And I don't really watch a whole lot of what I've done. I don't have time. I mean, I just frankly do not have time. But, and most actors don't. But, when you do get a chance to see it, when you go to like we've had, back before the pandemic, we've had screenings and stuff at movie theaters, and, you show up and there's a crowd. And as a director and as an actor, watching the final product, I'm just like, oh, not all the time, but sometimes I'm like, oh man, I really missed the mark on that. I should have done it this way. But that's art too. You can second guess yourself for the rest of your life. It's never finished like that is the best it's ever going to be. You'll never feel that way. So it's kind of a mixed blessing, I guess. But anyway, we don't really get a chance to see what we've done other than the final product.
My last question is if you had any interesting anecdotes from your time working on the show.
Wow, working on Darker Than Black, man, I got to tell you, brother, that was so long ago. That was, 14 years ago. I mean, I don't. I'm sorry. That's a letdown for you, I know, but I
problem.
don't really. I was racking my brain, man, trying to think like, God, what happened? I probably should have called Zach, but even then, he would have said something. I'd go, okay, but I don't remember that, but I will say though, that was one of the funnest shows I've worked on. I just, again, I love working on shows like Darker Than Black. Probably more than anything, just because of the realism. The goofier shows are fun. You get to do funny, goofy characters and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, as an actor, I really, really enjoy being real, and those are things you can kind of sink your teeth into, which I really enjoy. And Darker Than Black was certainly one of those shows. And I think to just say this, kind of put a final nail in it here. Darker Than Black, the character of Huang, while I've done other types of characters since then, he's sort of the character that, it's not exactly the same, but if you watch any shows that I've done now lately, it's not quite as rough like this, but it is certainly something like this, like Hohenheim from Full Metal Alchemist, Gendo from Evangelion, All for One from My Hero Academia. I mean, they're all kind of rooted in that kind of voice, just not as rough. But certainly that's kind of, like I said earlier, that is right in my wheelhouse, and that's what I love to do.